Welcome to Conversations with Buddy. It's 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, coming to you live from the Rec Podcast Studio here in Kaiser, Oregon, where we hear the stories of average people like you and I who impact each of us for a bigger purpose. Today's guest, he's been a friend of mine for, I'd say, 3 or 4 or 5 years. I've known his dad for a long time, but this young man has impacted me personally. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. But first, let me welcome Victor Hux.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, man. So let me tell you a little bit about Victor Hux. So Victor, he's been married for 8 years.
Yeah.
Those are good years, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Good, tough,
Good
fun.
and tough.
Yeah.
Okay. He has one daughter. Her name's Juniper. She goes by Junie, and she's the cutest thing ever. And you have some news about a boy on the way, so that's cool.
Yeah.
You are a pastor's kid, so we call him a PK.
Yep.
I knew some of those growing up. You're the oldest of 2 brothers.
Mm-hmm. 3 brothers total. I have 2 brothers. Yeah.
Gotcha. Exactly. Yep. The oldest of 3 brothers. There you go. You're a scuba diver. You like music. You majored in music.
Yep.
And you're a novice woodworker.
Very novice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You've got to do a lot of amazing traveling and meet a lot of interesting people. Let's just start with that real quick. So where have you traveled to, and why was that important to you?
So back in, I think it was 2003, so that's pretty little. My dad received a grant from the Lilly Foundation and got to, he had been teaching the Alpha course, which is kind of like a new believer introduction. Here's what we believe and why. He'd been teaching that for about 10 years and wrote this essay saying, hey, it'd be really neat for me to do 2 things. One, go and meet Nicky Gumbel, who created that program in London. And 2, when my dad was in seminary, he babysat for a man from South Africa named Chenuwani Farazani, and he was an outspoken critic of the apartheid government, had been imprisoned and tortured multiple times, and was in the United States for rehab. So he had gotten enough international attention. They didn't want to kill him, so they sent him to the U.S. and banished him from South Africa. He ended up being an adjunct professor at my dad's seminary, and my dad babysat his kids and got to know him that way. And so he said it'd be really neat to go visit him, see him in his home, now that they're a free people, essentially. So he wrote this essay, and they gave him the grant. So in 2004, we first went and visited my dad's friend in Sweden and spent some time up there, visited my mom's friend in Switzerland, and then went and spent some time in London. And my dad got to attend an Alpha course, kind of seminar, leaders seminar or something like that. And then the following year, we spent 6 weeks in South Africa with the Farazanis. And Chenu was, at the time, the Speaker of the House for the state, the province he was in. So as a 10-year-old, we're driving around with armed bodyguards and have a light we can put on top of the car, and got to see the facilities he was tortured in, got to hear the stories of just some really incredible things, and see a couple really amazing examples of forgiveness and repentance.
Wow.
He got a phone call one night, and he said, "You will not believe who this was." And my dad says, "Well, who was it?" He goes, "This was a man who tortured me when I was in prison, and he called to ask if I could be a reference on a job application."
No kidding.
So got to see a lot of really neat stuff like that at a pretty young age, pretty formational age.
Yeah.
And then in college, I got to travel around the country, playing at different churches and playing for camps and things. And so I got to meet a lot of interesting people, see a lot of different churches, a lot of different dynamics, how they're run, how they do things, what, from my perspective, worked and didn't, and what mattered and what didn't. And found a lot of things we focus on don't matter as much as some of the things we don't focus on.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely true. Well, let's segue into that. So music is one of your passions.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that. I want to learn more about that. So first of all, where did you grow up at, other than your travels? Where did you go to college at? And where did you play music at? And what did you play?
So I was born up in Galata, Montana.
Okay.
I think I was population 11. and my brother was 12, and my dad pastored 3 churches up there. So had I think it was a 60-mile rotation every Sunday morning.
Oh, wow. Are you kidding me?
And yeah, and that's I think the collective congregation size was maybe 100. And that was just how it was, a lot of pastors got assigned up on the prairie, and it's just nothing but flat wheat and cattle farms. It's about 50 miles south of the Canadian border, so really hot in the summer, really cold in the winter, and really windy. And my dad loved it out there. He grew up in Southern California, so it was nice to have clean air and not a ton of people. But my mom grew up in the mountains in Western Washington and then Eastern Washington, so it drove her nuts.
It's like, I want to get out of here.
Yeah, but when I was a year and a half and my middle brother was like 6 weeks old, we moved to Salem, and so lived here, grew up here. My dad pastors Our Savior's Lutheran Church and has since '96.
Wow.
And was there till college, went to New Hope Christian College in Eugene, and went there to study music. I'm a drummer. That's my biggest passion in music, but I've had to kind of pick up. I sang, as you know, in choir throughout high school and back to the Salem Boys Choir days, and had to pick up some guitar and took piano lessons before drums. So play a little bit of everything. I actually led worship on guitar this past weekend, and then 2 weeks ago on keyboard. So
that's kind of cool.
Just enough to get by on those, but drums is where I'm happiest.
That's your passion.
Yeah.
I wish I had 1 ounce of what you've got going on, but I don't. That's cool. That's awesome. In college, you met a guy, one of your mentors. Tell me about your mentor.
So the college used to be Eugene Bible College, and back in the 70s, a guy named Wayne Cordero went there after he'd recently been saved, and that was the college was, struggling a little bit, and God really put on his heart to mentor young Christian leaders. And so he came, and he had a very successful church in Hawaii, New Hope Oahu, and he came and invested in the school and ended up, I think it was my senior year, maybe, stepping in as the president. And I had worked, I went there and got my degree and had done work-study jobs through there and some of the admin things. And so I kind of had a foot in the door already, and he offered me a job afterward working in student services, which turned into financial aid, which turned into student accounts and donor accounts, and kind of pushed me into where I am now, which is really neat to look at in retrospect. But my first kind of real in with him was they were looking for workers he has a horse boarding farm out just west of Eugene with a lot of landscaping. And so he would hire college students to do the landscaping for him. And I remember I showed up, and I'd already kind of accepted a job with better pay up in Salem, so I was going to have to commute every day. And this was a little better pay, and I didn't have to commute, an hour each day, or 2 hours each day. So I took the job, and I show up, and I'm already pretty happy about it. And and it was my brother and another friend of ours and myself. And he goes, "Which one of you is the oldest?" And I said, "Well, me." And he goes, "You just got a raise. You're in charge now."
Oh.
So that was fun.
It's a great lesson.
But I got to know him well. And then his daughter and son, they had it was kind of a guest house that they lived in while they were building their house on the property. And so their daughter and son-in-law and their 3 kids had lived there for the past several years. They moved back to Hawaii. And when Pastor Wayne would go visit Hawaii and preach or do whatever over there, he would ask us to come stay there and house it. And finally, he just said, we were living in on-campus apartments. He said, "What are you charging? What are they charging you for rent?" And told him what it was. And he goes, "I'll undercut them by $50 a month if you come live here." And you kidding me? Oh, and you can, muck stalls and do stuff like that to pay your rent.
Yeah.
So it was a really good setup for struggling, broke college student, but I got to see him behind the scenes.
Yeah, the real Wayne.
And see just I was always very wary of big church preachers, and part of that was traveling around seeing these different churches, a lot of charisma, and then a lot of scandal, and those things often went hand in hand. But when I assumed the same, it's kind of how I operate, and then guilty until proven innocent, I guess.
Yeah.
But I got to see him, and I remember one time a piece of a tractor had busted, and we were trying to pound a bolt back in, and he's taking a crescent wrench, which is not the right tool, but he's working on it, and he's smacking it. This is metal on metal, and he misses and just smashes his thumb, and he goes, "Shoot!" And I thought, all right, it's real.
It's real.
That's about as raw as it gets.
That's
so,
funny.
but yeah, just an incredible guy. And then I worked for him at the college too. So I was getting a lot of leadership training and, lessons about not only the ministry side of a church and a ministry, organization, but also the business side of it. And learned a lot. I'd never done anything financially related. And there I was, I had to fly to Denver and attend a federal aid training, which was an experience. I stayed in a $20, $30 a night hostel in downtown Denver. I learned a lot.
That's funny.
A lot of stuff I didn't really care to learn. But so it was just, kind of trial by fire. And he would always say, we're flying the plane. The plane's already in the air. You got to figure out how to fix it.
That's right. That's right.
And that was confusing and frustrating and difficult, but really a good way to learn and grow.
Welcome to leadership, by the way. That's how it operates. You don't have the manual on exactly case by case.
Yeah.
You're flying the plane, figure out how to make it work.
Right.
Keep it running. We're going to segue a little bit and talk about really what you do for a living, because you're a financial advisor. You're probably more than that. You're probably part marriage counselor, whatever. But before we go dive into the finance part, I want to talk about some fun stuff. So you scuba dive. Mm-hmm. You do woodworking. Which of those two do you love most?
Oh, man. So I don't do either near as much as I'd like to.
Okay.
I guess the family trade on my mom's side is carpentry.
Okay.
But I don't do as much of that. I built a bed for my daughter recently, and so I do little things like that make me feel like I'm probably better than I am. I did more in high school, but it's because I could get a credit for it. But I really enjoy it, and I used to build drums. I'd put together a few drums and sold them, and thought for sure, if my retirement plan, I think I'll be building a lot of drums for fun. So
if I buy these drums from you, are you also going to teach me how to play the drums?
Yeah, if I can find a couple hundred hours to put into building a drum set,
done.
Yeah,
okay,
it's a deal.
If you can find that couple hundred hours,
yeah.
Well, cool. Well, sounds like woodworking's fun. But tell me one place you went scuba diving that you loved.
There was so where I did I've gotten to do a couple tropical dives, and I like them, but I also think they spoil you. And I live in the Northwest, so I should be able to dive in the Northwest. There's a place up in the Hood River Canal, Hood Canal, near the Puget Sound, called Sund Rock, and it's a marine preserve. I like going and harvesting something to eat, but this is just a marine preserve, and so I got to see big octopus and a bunch of wolf eels, which are creepy but cool.
Yeah.
And a lion-maned jellyfish with probably a 20-foot trail. So that's a pretty cool spot. It's cold, but it's really neat. You don't get to see that very often because, most of those animals are harvested or, shied away. And they know right where the borders of the marine preserve are, and
Isn't
they don't
that
go out it. Yeah.
It's like an elk refuge.
Yeah, right.
Elk come down to the refuge. I go to Coos Bay with my family, and there's a refuge before you get into Coos Bay. And they just stand out there like no big deal. But when you go hunting,
they're gone.
In a different area, they're nowhere to be found. So same deal.
Yep. Yeah, smarter than we think.
Let's talk about kind of why I have you here for today is really money, finance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you kind of learned through a guy named Wayne, not just how to work hard, but to run a business and from a college standpoint. When did you get into the finance world? How old were you? How long have you been doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got lots of good questions for you because I probably have something to learn here.
Okay. Well, so the firm I'm at now, it's with Thrivent Financial, and we're a Christian company.
Yeah.
The office I work in, junior partner with a guy named Sean Ryan, and he and my dad have been friends since we moved here in '96. So they're like they're neighbors now too.
Mm-hmm.
They own a boat together. They're a lot of trouble.
If you own a boat together, man, you know it's connected.
Yeah, it's almost a marriage. A lot of tough decisions. But he had offered me, to join him in his practice after I graduated high school, and then again after I graduated college. And both times my response was, I don't want to work in finance. And when we found out we were pregnant with my daughter,
yeah.
I told him we were at a wedding, and he said, well, the offer still stands. And I thought, I'm working in finance already, but I'm not. I enjoyed parts of it.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy so much the kind of collections side of it.
Yeah.
And so I said I should give this some more thought because I was making ministry, 22-year-old ministry money, and thought long term this is going to not pay the bills for a growing family. So looked into it. Really, a lot of things just aligned and kind of moved me that way regardless. And that was really, it's really evident in hindsight. But I think it was kind of I felt a little bit of a nudge to do that. And that's usually enough for me to go off of. And it's done okay so far. But now looking back on it, I can see, wow, that was the Lord prompting me because, lots happened since then.
Yeah.
We're growing our family. We bought a house. We're putting a new roof on today, which was
lovely. That's expensive.
Yeah, yes. Great financing though.
Yeah.
So I've been with Thrivent 3 years. I actually recently, just earlier this year, became a partner. So I kind of get to just focus on our practice as a whole instead of kind of work on my own practice and have, a stake and some input in this other thing. So that's been pretty nice. And I enjoy it and get to, again, meet a lot of really interesting people and always a new problem to solve, which is fun. And it keeps it entertaining and interesting.
Yeah. Never a dull moment with a problem. And by the way, everybody has a financial problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't care how much money you make, how much money you don't make.
Yeah.
We all have a problem. Mm-hmm. So how do you, as you think about the people that you mentor, I guess you'd call it mentoring, you advise, some are younger, like your age, because you're still in your 20s, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I'm 27.
You're 27. How do you advise those millennials in your own age group, number one, and how do you advise somebody older like me or your father-in-law or whoever? Tell me about that.
So it really comes down to what's important to them. I can't make anything important to them. I can explain to them why I think it might need to be, but it's not going to matter if it's not important to them. And they're not going to want to do anything if it's not important to them. My job is to try to paint a picture of help them see clearly where they actually are at and ask them honest questions about where they want to be. A lot of times just getting asked a question will bring up something you've never thought about before. Well, what does that look like? How much are you going to need for this? Do you want to be able to travel? Do you want to be able to buy a new car every 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is? And a lot of people just think, well, I just want to be able to not work. And that's when you're looking at retirement planning. Now, I think talking to people my age, there's not much confidence in Social Security. There's
social insecurity.
Yeah, and sometimes even the the world as a whole. Oh, it's probably not going to be around then anyways. We're going to blow ourselves up or something. So a lot of it's conversations about trying to shift the focus from this is what's good right now for me and I like this, but what can you sacrifice now that'll make your future, what you want it to be.
Yeah.
There's a great line I heard once that my job in the meeting is to be an advocate for them 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road.
Got it.
And no one else is going to be.
Well, I think what I hear you say is most people are trying to figure out how to pay the bills today because we have inflation, gas prices are higher, food prices are higher, house prices are higher, interest rates are higher, everything's higher. And so they're looking only at today. And you're like, yeah, that's important, but what's it look like in 20 years? What do you need to do today to move the needle?
Yeah.
So in 20 or 30 years, 40 years, when you want to retire, you can actually do that.
Right.
I like how you ask great questions. You don't tell people what to do. You ask great questions to stimulate their brain. And
Try to anyway.
you try to.
Yeah.
And you start with, where are you?
Yeah.
Like honestly, most people don't even know where they're at.
Right. Yeah.
They might be worried, fearful of the market, but they actually don't know where they're at.
And that's not an age specific thing. I've met with people who they're in their 80s and I say, well, where are you at? And they go, oh, I've got some here, I've got some here. And as you ask more questions, oh, well, I've got this here too, and I've got this here. And you're going, they didn't really know their picture until they start digging. And I guess it's kind of a good problem to have.
Why is that? Why is that we're really curious. We want to be where we want to be in 10 or 20 years, but we don't even know where we're at. Why is that the case?
I think there's a couple reasons for that, and depending on the situation, I think a lot of people don't want to admit it and don't want to face it. I talk to a lot of people with a lot of debt, and I believe there's good debt and there's bad debt. $90,000 of credit card debt, not a good thing.
Not a good debt.
Yeah. There's you leveraging a mortgage to your advantage and getting really cheap money, as you know. That's a good kind of debt.
Yeah.
But a lot of people,
you gotta live somewhere, right?
Yeah, you gotta live somewhere. You can pay your own mortgage or pay someone else's.
Paying somebody's.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, one, don't want to look at it. Two, I think a lot of people are okay with the status quo. It's okay. It's fine. It's not worth the effort. Or maybe even a third would be they just don't, this is kind of related to the status quo, but they don't want to change anything. Because, it could be better, but it's good enough. And that's, there's something nice about the contentment of it.
Yeah.
But also, if it's worth it to them, again, to, bring up, well, if you keep things the way they are now, when you pass away, state of Oregon's going to end up with X.
Yeah.
An attorney's going to end up with X. And do you like that? If there's a way to get around that, do you want to minimize that?
Right. You mentioned status quo, or people just don't want to change. Mm-hmm. What about keeping up with the Joneses on social media? Yeah. If you get a new car, all of a sudden, I want a new car.
Yeah.
You must be happy. I can see your smiling face by your car that you just bought. What I don't know is that you just financed a $50,000 car at $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And you're really broke. But I misinterpret that. It looks like you're having way more fun. So I then go buy the new car and get into debt.
Yep.
The book, The Millionaire Next Door, really impacted me. Because a lot of times you can see somebody actually who has money, who's wealthy, but they actually look like they're poor. Mm-hmm. And then you see somebody who, let's see, what was I saying there? Somebody who does have money, they appear to be poor, but then there's people who appear to be rich, but they actually are poor.
Yeah.
So we get caught up in that. Mm-hmm. How do we do the delayed gratification? Dave Ramsey talks a lot about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily subscribe to all of Dave Ramsey, but the whole debt piece.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
Well, he has a great line. He says, if you don't like being debt free, you can always go back.
That's a great one.
And that's stuck with me too.
If you don't like being debt free, you can always go back.
You can always go back. There's plenty of offers. You get 2 credit card things a day in the mail, and I think that's where that contentment piece comes in. You know, I know a lot of people who are very wealthy, and their lifestyle reflects that. You know, they're driving nice cars. They, don't care. They can throw a big tip around and stuff, and that's, their prerogative. I think the people I prefer to work with and the person I hope to be someday is whether I already think I have a really rich life. You know, I think I have a lot of things that I know I have a lot of things that money could never buy. I have a wonderful family. Yeah. My home, and beyond. My extended family's really close. There's some, stuff here and there, but every family has that, and most all of us love Jesus and are trying to follow him. Yeah. And I have a job that gives me a lot of flexibility, and I get to be here on a Monday morning. So there's a lot of things I think I already have that if I were in even 4 or 5 years ago would be sitting there going, man, I wish I had that. And that's really important to look at where you are. And that's part of that process is going, wow, I'm really grateful for all of this. And it's one thing that I really like about Thrivent as a company is you're working with faith-based people, and you have at least that common ground. You can relate with them. And I'll tell you, when someone passes away, and it's we call them death claims. Sounds kind of morbid, but
is what it is.
It's a old life insurance policy or something that I get to help pay out. It's a lot easier to sit with a family that's grieving when there's hope than when there's not. And I've had a few where there's not. And it's rough. It's really rough. But all that to say, I think the biggest and maybe most important lesson in finance is being content with what you have and learning to live within your means and appreciate where you are at.
The 3 takeaways I wrote down were contentment, that you seem pretty content. You have a rich life. It has nothing to do with money, and you're grateful. I think I was just thinking this weekend, I went over to see my dad this weekend, and my wife did not come with me, but I get time to reflect. I'm like, really, as an American, I'm probably in the top 5% of money earners in the entire world. So are you. Yeah. Yet sometimes if we look at our bank account as we're lacking, then we're not content. Right. But we are rich. Yeah. And rich isn't in terms of money, in terms of relationships. Yeah. So I think if you're a 27-year-old teaching an old guy like me, the 3 things: being content, that our lives are rich, and if we remain grateful, that's where it all begins. The rest of the money piece, that's easy. You gotta get the foundation right.
Yeah. Well, and it's an ongoing thing. I struggle with it, with contentment big time. I have expensive hobbies. I really like cars. I can't afford nice cars. We have nice cars, but I can't afford I would love someday to have a GT350 Mustang, a 67, and they're more expensive than my house, and I'll never own one, but I like looking at them, and the thought of driving one someday is pretty fun. I don't think that's probably a wise use of funds, but
it's fun to think about.
It's fun to think about, and there's a museum here in town that has 6 or 7 of them.
I just wrote it down. I'm going to invite you to this.
I went a couple months ago with my wife's uncle and my wife, but I would love to go again because
you're my guest. I'll bring you.
Okay.
I got the personal invitation. So
I love it. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, we're going to wrap up here in a moment, but I'm going to ask you one final question. There's somebody in your life that's probably, at least from what I gather, has made a major impact in your life. That's your grandpa. So give us a final word on how somebody who's 95 impacts your life from when you're a little boy to where you're at today.
So both my grandpas, and this is, again, one of the ways I count myself super blessed. I had grandparents that absolutely loved and cared about all their grandkids and wanted time with them. And the time they spent with us, we lived kind of halfway between. We were in Salem. One set's in Spokane, outside of Spokane. The other one was in Santa Rosa. And so we didn't get to see them very often. And when we did, they were all hands-on. And, my mom's dad passed away about 6 years ago. Maybe 7 years ago now, I can't remember. And he was kind of the man's man. He was a cowboy and worked contracting his whole life and rode horses, and he rode dirt bikes with us and stuff. I
love this guy already.
Yeah, he was, taught me how to shoot. He was kind of what every little boy wants to grow up to be. And I think and kind of a wild guy, very devoted to the Lord, but there was no fear in him, and he did a lot of reckless things just because, I could try that. And it was really fun to grow up with him as an influence and see his faith. He preached at a nursing home every week or once a month. And, those audio clips we have are some of the, my most treasured possessions now. And then my dad's dad, he was in the Navy after the war, in World War II, and became a corpsman and a doctor after that. And he had my dad and two older sisters, and they went to Korea, and he was in the Peace Corps, and they adopted my Aunt Mira. And he's older. He's, my other grandpa would be 82 now, I think.
Okay.
And then grandpa's 95. So, and I was on the younger end of the cousins. So
got it.
I didn't really connect with him. He was always playing with us and engaged with us, but we also irritated him more, I think. And it wasn't until I was older I really started getting to know him and knowing him through my dad. So they had, kind of the classic father-son teenage years. And then, but my grandpa was always this steadfast, faithful voice in my dad's life. And I didn't know that growing up. I, didn't really think about it. And then hearing stories now, and my grandpa just has always, he's very witty, even at 95, almost 95. But he'll say little things that just sit with you, and some of them really funny, some of them just really profound, and he's really helped steer my dad's life in a direction that has led to where we are, because it's really fun to look back and see all those things and track God's faithfulness through it and God's faithful followers and how that's trickled down. And all I really hope is to continue that to my kids. And now we're having a son.
Wow.
And, the due date is a week after my grandpa's 95th birthday. So we'll have my son, myself, my dad, and my dad's dad all together as often as we can and as many times as we can.
4 generations, man.
Yeah,
That's
95-year span.
Yeah. Victor, thanks for your time here today. It's been a lot of fun. I know you pretty well, but I always get to know my guests better as I have these conversations. How do people reach out to you if they want to know a little bit more about what you do, what impacts you, maybe something on this podcast triggered them, maybe your marriage with your wife, or what's it like, anticipating, your second child, or your faith, or your finance? How do they reach out to you? Yeah,
I've got a Facebook page. I kind of keep up on it. It's just Victor Hux, Thrivent, or give us a call, look us up. If you Google me, that's what you'll get. So,
well, that's fantastic. So people will be reaching out to you and connect with you. So thank you. Appreciate you being a part of this. Appreciate the Rec hosting our podcast each week. We love doing this, by the way. It's a lot of fun. And we're looking each week to impact people with someone's story. And I really enjoy this. I learn a lot, and I look forward to continue doing this. So we look forward to talking with you next week. Thank you so much.